Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Carline Catch Up. You're here with Sonia and Christine.
Hello.
Hello. Today's topic is going to be the top ed tech companies of 2025, and that's defined by, curated by GSV, Global Silicon Valley, if you don't know what GSV is. And how we got to this topic, because this is going to be just a more informative episode. Christine and I have actually been following the Arizona State University ASU plus Global Silicon Valley GSV. So it's called ASU plus GSV Summit. And GSV is a group that's invested in what they call a pre-K to gray education and workforce innovation space. But think about it, pre-K to gray, they're talking about the continuum and wanting to invest in that continuum. So pretty cool down both of our alleys. And we watch the summit and we look at the videos and, we follow the speakers. It's really exciting stuff for us to dig into. And the summit is coming up again. So we just kind of wanted to share what's out there and some of what we find interesting and what we get out of it, which is why this is going to be a little more informational than just we had this one driving question. So I'm going to let Christine introduce the summit.
Sure. So the summit, as Sonia was saying, is a collaboration between Arizona State University and Global Silicon Valley. So it started back in 2010, and their guiding principle is that all people should have equal access to the future. So they believe in addressing, as Sonia said in her introduction, that addressing innovations at scale, basically, for this pre-K to gray space. Um, that it's critical to achieving the goal of equal access. And so, just to give a little bit more information on these two specific groups. So, ASU, Arizona State University, pursues research that contributes to public good. They assume responsibility for the economic, social, and cultural vitality of communities that surround it. And they've actually been named the most innovative university by US News and World Reports for 10 years running. So they're on the forefront of this stuff, along with many other things, as Sonia and I know. We've chased ASU for quite a while. And then GSV, Global Silicon Valley, is a female-led global community, an investment platform focused solely on elevating the scope and scale of innovation in that 7 trillion education and workforce sector. So you're talking about a huge sector that they're involved in. And we're just so excited about this summit. As Sonia said, we watched it and we've been following it, and we're just super excited to hear what they have coming up. But with that, I would really love Sonia to talk more about these top ed tech groups and what they're doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So, one of the things that GSV puts out is a listing, an annual listing of top edtech companies, and they use a proprietary rubric to evaluate edtech companies, and then they put out the list so that you can learn about those companies and then continue to invest in them and understand what those companies invested in also. So it just like it's a learning gift that keeps giving. And we're going to put several links on our website. And so if you're interested in the ideas or the companies or learning more, please go visit and do so. So for the 150 top, what GSV did was evaluate over 2,500 global companies. And part of what they put in their rubric was revenue scale, revenue growth, user research, geographic diversification, margin profile. And these are all VC and PE backed companies, so venture capital and private equity. And they're experiencing basically the culmination of the rubric is showing that these companies are experiencing top line growth, the minimum double digit million US dollars in revenue. So for anybody who thinks education isn't profitable, there is some profit here. And the idea is for ASU GSV to invest in something that is profitable, but in that profit, that return investment feeds back into the pre-K to gray space in the innovations, technology, betterment of our future society. So, there's a philanthropic spin, but there's also business and philanthropy and learning science and business science kind of going on all at the same time here. Um, Let me see. I want to make sure I'm reading some key things to you here. Uh, there is a statement on the GSV website about this list that says the rapid rise of generative AI is fueling knowledge and creating opportunities we had not imagined before. Um, it's making education more engaging. AI tools are driving personalization and productivity, and learning is happening at the speed of light. And that's why there's so much interest in what ed tech companies are doing because they are the ones that are harnessing the powers of AI to keep this learning at the speed of light going. One more quick thing here. In 2025, the GSV 150, this group of the top 150 that they've selected out of the over 2,500, collectively reach 3 billion learners and generate more than $25 billion in annual revenue. So going back to what Christine was saying about what 7 trillion impacted. So these 150 alone, 3 billion learners, 25 billion in annual revenue. And by sector, just so you know what I'm going to put out here, the curiosity is, I think if you're not in the education space, depending on where you are in your work and your children's lives, you probably think ed tech is used for just one certain group. Like, oh, my kids are in school, in K-12 school, so I know there's some ed tech companies. We have to go online to do some learning. Or let's say you're taking classes in a collegiate space or you're teaching at the collegiate level. You think, oh my gosh, of course, we're using these platforms and these learning tools, so that must be ed tech. But out of these 150 top companies, 48% of them are K-12 focused companies. 46% are focused on workforce learning. So we're like in the middle of the spectrum, towards the end of the spectrum of that pre-K gray. 31% consider themselves higher education. 12% consider themselves adult consumer learning. And here's the nugget I found really fascinating. 4% are in the early childhood market. So, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Just rounding out like where these companies are from. Most of the 2025 companies are based in North America, 58% in the US, with a small percentage in Canada. There is significant representation this year from Indian companies, 11%, European companies, 15%. And I also found this piece interesting. After 2 years of not being in this top 150 list, Chinese ed tech companies are back on the list. Okay, so just tiny aside, that makes my brain go, where were the Chinese companies? What happened? Was that on GSV's end? I looked into this and it was harder to find than I thought, but apparently the Chinese government asked the Chinese companies to pull out. Um, they were taken out of the for-profit market and then not eligible to compete. I don't know why beyond that, but that was for the last 2 years. And then this year, there are some companies that were able to break through and made it to the top with that revenue and learner reach. So that's pretty cool. Um, let's see. One more thing I wanted to share was going back to that question about the 4% of these 150 being an early childhood space. So as an educator myself, you might think early childhood, if we're using AI and technology, I mean, you don't want little kids on computers. Why would there be any ed tech companies in this space? And then when you have small children, you think to yourself, we need to expand, we need to do more, we need to get them started earlier. And once you start interacting with the teachers of your children in the early childhood space, you think, I really want those teachers to have the same thing that K-12 teachers have. And how can we get them things earlier, right? So I wanted to shout out these companies that made it in the 150 in the early childhood space because I find them pretty fascinating what they're working on. Like, what do you use AI for in early childhood space? So, one of the companies is called Age of Learning. What they put together is standards aligned curriculum and frameworks using and working with Head Start early learning. And then they help personalize learning. So definitely sounds like a resource that's geared to the adults who are going to be taking on the responsibility of educating children, young children in the anywhere from birth to pre-K space. What their developmental needs are could be an example of things that are standards aligned for Head Start. The next company is called Begin. This one was really cool. They make play products for learning, and those products are aligned to what they call their 5 C's that I think are kind of the pillars that they believe are important for early learning. Core skills, creativity, critical thinking, curiosity, and character. Again, we're talking about anywhere from birth through the preschool time. I find the play products part interesting because I am not an early childhood mom. I am not great at playing. I am great at talking and giving instruction and having students repeat back to me and dialogue and discourse at a middle school level at minimum. So when I had a young child and I started to learn about how important it was to stimulate the mind and then like even the tactile things that they needed in order to be able to grip and tie shoes and buttons, play products are extremely important. So I thought that was fascinating. There's a company that's using technology to make this more accessible. The third company is Brightwheel. And this might be one that more listeners have heard of. It's gotten really big really fast, and this one is so needed. Childcare management software and resources for billing, payroll, taxes, communication, and they are starting to add on a curriculum component also so that it can help those who are running childcare centers and daycares help their teachers. Brightwheel is pretty amazing because it is a very difficult business to run. There are a lot of pieces, a lot of mandates, and then in some ways, a lot of freedom too. And these businesses, as many Head Start or pre-K programs you can think of, there are so many more home learning centers and daycares being run by families out there. Um, the fourth group out there in that early childhood tech space is IXL learning. This may be one that school age parents are familiar with because your kids may be practicing reading or math lessons on IXL. This one is focused on digital curriculum that has diagnostic assessments and personalization. It just starts at a pre-K level where there are a lot of other platforms out there that only start like for K-12. So that's pretty neat to know that they are taking a responsibility for the transition between pre-K, that continuum. Um, so IXL is a little bit more traditional of what people think about ed tech, but in the early childhood space also. Love Every, another play kit company, again from ages 0 to 10. And they have a star-studded advisory board, one that has some rock star educators from different disciplines in the United States, and they basically are. It's like a great gift idea that you can deliver a kit to a child or a family, and it helps them start to again build their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills and their creativity and their curiosity. It I had to giggle that some of the things that they were selling in their or putting together in their play groups packages are blocks, wooden blocks. But I didn't have any before I had a child. And even when I did get some eventually, I didn't know what to do with them because I hadn't been around a small child in a really long time. So, these kits come with instructions of places to start, and help you kind of rediscover your interaction with play so that you can support your child, which is genius. And then the last company is Teaching Strategies. Again, a little bit more like IXL. It's a curriculum-based thing, so you might understand that as, oh yeah, ed tech. They focus on what's called the creative curriculum, and it's more for infants and toddlers. So, not focused on that K-12 space. It also comes with assessments and professional development. So, out of the 150 top companies, early childhood is getting some prime time here. It's only 4% of that 150 market, but being there is a big deal. So I guess I had a couple of questions at the end of this. One was, do these companies network regularly and authentically? Um, they're related in that same space, but they're not necessarily direct competitors. So I think it would be fascinating if they could align and network and grow within each other and then grow other R&D pilots and reforms and policies. They really could make a big impact while they grow their revenue, in that pre-K space that leads to a more sustainable pre-K to grade space. Um, I'm also wondering how the companies are expanding out. Um, I'm wondering if there's a market cap because the K-12 space is so large and there's already dedicated income there. But those play kits probably come with a cost that is not available to everybody. They're not fully accessible. So I wondered like how they will be able to reach out without more networking, without policy change and reform. Uh, yeah, I know that was an earful and a mouthful, but I hope you can see why Christine and I are so excited by these nuggets that ASU and GSV together provide. Christine.
Yeah, and I think too, to add to that point is, you know, even if you don't have a child in this space, it's going to affect, it's going to touch everybody. These even down to the fact that if you run a business and you have employees that have small children that are, in daycare spaces and stuff, these are topics that might come up. And I'm curious too about the future saturation in that early child space, of ed tech companies with AI coming to the forefront and how that's going to be used, and kind of doing that delicate dance of exposing children to technology while still letting their curiosity kind of out in the wild in nature have its course too. So I'll be curious about that. Kind of to circle back around. So, as we mentioned in the beginning, ASU GSV are having their summit. It's coming up this year. They've titled it Learning at the Speed of Light, and it's going to be held April 6th to April 9 in San Diego. There's so many speakers, so from fascinating groups, backgrounds, everything, but just to kind of give you a couple examples of who might be there. So Teach for America, many colleges and universities are going to show up. Big consulting and advisory firms like Accenture, McKinsey, BCG, Gates Foundation, Microsoft. So there are some big voices coming to this summit to talk about this space. Now, we watched the summit last year via live stream. It is not yet up on the website. That could change at any minute. But the website for everybody listening or watching, it's www.asugSVsummit.com/live. So if you go to that, more than likely when the summit starts getting a little bit closer, they'll have the full agenda up so you can actually see what topics are going to be discussed. pick out the ones you're interested in and tune in. And we're going to be tuning in with you and maybe another episode after the summit when we can discuss some of what we're going to be hearing because we're just so invested in the space and what's going on that I think it's going to be hard to not talk about it after we see it.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you, everyone.